Welcome to the next in our series of online lectures for Western Civ 2. Today we are going to continue our discussion of the French Revolution. Specifically, we are going to discuss what went wrong. As you can see, there are a number of terms that you should be able to track by the time this lecture is over, and some questions that you should be thinking about as you are watching this lecture. So anyway, with that said, let's get to it. So where did we leave things? Well, let's start by looking at the ideals on which the French Revolution was based. Those ideals came from the Enlightenment. So where do we see that? First of all, we see it in numerous places. For one thing, the decision of the Third Estate to declare itself to be the National Assembly, or in other words, the sole representatives of the French people, was clearly an ideal from the Enlightenment. So was the Declaration of the Rights of Man, which declared an end to social class, and declared all French people to be equal. Finally, the new Constitution limited the king's authority, thereby ending absolutism. Once again, this was an idea straight out of the Enlightenment. So, what went wrong? How did we go from this to this? Let's start with the man at the center of all of this, King Louis XVI. Up until June of 1791, the king claimed that he supported the revolution. He had accepted the new constitution, and he seemed to accept his new role in a constitutional monarchy. It's all a lie. The king was furious about the changes forced upon him, and he began plotting to undo the revolution and to save his family. The king and his family will sneak out of Paris. Their goal is Austrian territory. Why Austria? Well, remember, the Queen of France, Marie Antoinette, is the daughter of the Austrian emperor. Historians speculate that Louis planned to seek sanctuary with Austria, and then use the Austrian army to overthrow the new government. He almost made it. Just a few miles from the Austrian border, the king's carriage had to stop in the town of Varennes. There, the king was recognized, and the royal family detained. The new French army, which was loyal to the revolution, was called, and they forced the king's carriage to return to Paris. This turned out to be a turning point in the revolution. There we go. The king's flight illustrates that the king does not support the revolution, nor does he support the new constitution or the limits on his power. This changes the way the people of France see their king. Up until now, they loved him and saw him as looking out for their best interests. Now, not so much. Look at the image above. It's a political cartoon illustrating the king's return to Paris. He and his family are now being depicted not as beloved rulers, but as pigs being returned to the stable. Another thing that Another way the flight to Varennes will change the revolution is that it illustrates that the other nations of Europe were not supporters of the revolution. In reality, kings in Austria, Prussia, and Britain feared that a revolution could break out in their kingdoms as well. Thus, they began to threaten war should the king not be restored to his proper throne. France will beat them to it. In April of 1792, France will declare war on Austria and Prussia. The war will go badly at first, as the Austrian troops will defeat the French army in battle after battle. This will spark fear in Paris, as there is a real concern that the Austrians will suddenly come to the city and destroy it. Fear of an Austrian invasion will turn to violence in Paris, led by a loosely organized group, no longer simply mobs in the streets, but this new group were known as the sans-culottes. This referred to their tendency to wear long pants of a working man rather than the culottes favored by the nobility. They blamed the king and the nobility for undermining the revolution. In September of 1792, things will turn even uglier. As rumors of an Austrian attack on Paris fly through the streets, the mobs panic. Believing they had been betrayed, they went looking for enemies of the revolution in every corner of French society. Nobles and priests were arrested by the thousands and thrown into jail. About 1,200 were beaten to death. 225 of them were priests. Then in January of 1793, King Louis XVI will be convicted of treason and executed by guillotine. His queen, Marie Antoinette, will be executed in October of 1793. This marks the beginning of a more violent phase of the Revolution. Up until now, that revolution had largely been based upon the ideals of the Enlightenment. That's all changing from now on. Now, to bring order to Paris, the new French Constitution will be suspended. In other words, one of the great ideas of the Enlightenment, the Constitution, will be simply set aside. Instead, power to govern will be given to a new group known as the Committee of Public Safety. At the center of the committee was its leader, a man named Maximilien Robespierre. Under Robespierre's rule, the Committee of Public Safety began to seek out enemies of the revolution. They used terror as their weapon. Anyone suspected of anti-revolutionary activities was arrested and executed. This led to the deaths of 18,000 people by guillotine. Another 20,000 died across France through other means. Many were noblemen and church officials. Most, however, were members of the Third Estate who may have grumbled about continuing food shortages or the revolution's attacks on the church. This was simply all it took to be arrested and sent to the guillotine. The terror will end only in July of 1794, when Robespierre himself will be arrested and guillotined. With the terror ended and Robespierre dead, well, where are we? France, in fact, will remain in chaos. Moreover, the ideals of the Enlightenment that started the revolution have been abandoned. Many believe that France is in desperate need of a savior. Ready or not, here he comes.